Hi, welcome to Inside Out Leadership. I am your host, Robb Holman. I'm thrilled that you took time out of your busy schedule to join with me today. As some of you may know, I am on a mission to interview 12 of the greatest inside out leaders in the world in the next 12 months. These extraordinary leaders have come from business and sports and politics and entertainment who have faithfully demonstrated inspiration, humility, courage, perseverance, and servant leadership. As a result, they are leaving a ripple effect upon the world to affect future generations. Before I introduce a friend of mine, I'm sure we'd all agree to this. If there's one thing the world needs right now, if there's one thing perhaps that you need right now, it's peace. Peace within our homes, peace within our communities, peace within our country, peace within other countries within the world, and peace within the world itself. Not to mention peace in our own hearts and minds. Well, guess what? Today on this episode of Inside Out Leadership, we have my friend and expert in international relations, peace and reconciliation, Aref Dostyar. As a Fulbright Scholar recipient, Aref earned his master's degree in international peace studies from the University of Notre Dame. He previously worked for the Afghan government in different capacities, including Director General for International Relations and Regional Cooperation and Director of Peace and Reconciliation Affairs at the Office of the National Security Council. His peace process work has been published in the New York Times, among many other major news outlets. Currently, Aref is the Consul General of Afghanistan to Western United States to promote people-to-people ties between Afghans and Americans through partnerships in economic, cultural, and scientific initiatives. Before I officially give a warm welcome to Aref, I've got to share this particular episode and the entire series this year is brought to you by Auto Conversion. Auto Conversion is your media, advertising, and technology partner. And believe it or not, since 2017, I've been leveraging and utilizing auto conversion for my own PR and marketing strategy. So if you're a content strategist, if you're an author, if you're a speaker, please get in touch with auto conversion because they can help you like they've helped me. With no further delay, I want to welcome Aref to the conversation today. Aref, it's a joy to be with you. And I know it has been over 8 years since we last saw one another. So welcome to the Inside Out Leadership Show.
Thank you so much, Rob, for that great introduction. It's great to see you and it's great to be on your show. I look forward to having a conversation with you today on something that is not so usual. I'm really looking forward to this.
Good. Well, listen, I thought a great place to start was the whole Inside Out Leadership conversation. The temptation for many leaders is to talk about my guests' accolades and their accomplishments and things like that. Now, we might make mention of some of those things because how can we not? You've accomplished so much in the area of peace negotiations and peace process in your career. However, I want to get to know you. I want our audience, our community to get to know who you are, Aref, your mind, your heart. So it makes more sense, the things that you've done and the accomplishments that you've had. So for me, I want to share this and I want you to respond to it. I've been over to Afghanistan a number of times. And when I met you approximately 8 years ago, you were involved in a nonprofit organization. I was doing some inside out leadership training in private and public universities. And I met you. And one of the things that stood out to me about you, among all the other wonderful Afghan men and women that I met, was this. You were so optimistic. You were so hopeful. And I'm thinking, here's a war-torn country. And how does a man have so much hope? So I thought a great way to kind of begin our conversation is to talk about that a little bit. How do you, Aref, have hope in the midst of challenge, in the midst of just so many difficult things going on in Afghanistan, in the United States, and in our world? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob, and something that that I also reflect on occasionally, or more actually, especially in the context that we live in with the unfortunate active war going on in our country. It's very difficult to keep hope alive, and so that's a pretty legitimate question. But for me, what makes it easier to think through this question is locating myself in the context that I work in. And so if I take Afghanistan, for example, a couple of things come to my mind. Number one is our potential. The possibilities that are there in our country. First of all, our human capital. These are the things that we do not see on the news normally. We have a large educated segment of our society with a vision for peace, with a vision for development and prosperity for our country. And sometimes Afghanistan is portrayed as this rural country where most of its populations are living in the mountains and in the deserts, which I have difficulty understanding and believing that because we have all of these major cities. For example, take Kabul. With 6 million population out of a 30 million plus population country. We have another maybe 6 to 7 million people who are living abroad in our diaspora communities. They are urbanized. We have other major cities. And so my calculation is that it is more urbanized and more educated than it receives credit. So number one in our potential is the human capital. Number two is our natural resources. Afghanistan is also portrayed as this really poor country, but we are a rich country. If we look at it deeply, we are a rich country, and there's potential to use that richness and develop it and utilize it to make lives better. There is that potential. And it's not me saying this. There are lots of studies that are done that talks about the enormous natural wealth of our country in trillions. The third part in our potential is our geography, our location. Unfortunately, yes, throughout history, there have been times that it has been used as a curse, but it could definitely turn into a blessing. It could definitely turn into something that we can develop and utilize to make lives better. We are at this heart of Asia that can connect South and Central Asia, and they all need each other. We are trying to introduce Afghanistan as a roundabout. It's mostly portrayed in the news as this landlocked country that has no connection with the rest of the world. And that is a false narrative, Rob. The correct way to think about Afghanistan is that it is a land bridge. It is connecting different countries and goods and trade, and there's enormous potential for that can help the country grow and move forward, and we are doing our part to do that. And then the second thing that I reflect on that helps me keep my hope alive and get motivated to move on is that our environment is conducive to change. You can see change happening in front of your eyes. There are many kids who need education, for example. You build a school, the next day you see somebody in a school uniform with their books going to school and smiling and all, and it gives you a lot of hope. I have worked a lot with children, with university students, with the younger generation, and you see change happening. And I can give you tons of examples. I know that we will not have enough time for that, but these are some of the things, Rob, that gives me motivation and hope, because I believe in our country and in our potential.
No, I so appreciate that. And one thing that's highlighted to me in the midst of hearing from you on that topic about hope is, and it's an inside out leadership principle, which is if you look for the good in any situation, you'll find it. It's whether or not we're looking for it. So if someone's listening here, a leader's listening, and maybe they're looking around them and there doesn't seem to be like a whole lot of wonderful things going on, look for it. If you look for the good, you'll find it. You are one of these really optimistic people. You have what I call a higher perspective on life, on leadership, and everything that you get a chance to influence around you. And so that for me is very telling, RF, because there's not a whole lot of people that have a higher perspective. They can get caught up in the challenges and the struggle and the problems. And you are one person, you are one leader that looks for that good. And so practically, there's leaders listening right now and watching, and they want to look for the good, but it's difficult for them to do so. Are there some habits? Are there some disciplines in your personal life, in your leadership life that you do to help foster, having a higher perspective, having, and looking for the good in any situation, because it can be challenging for the average person and leader out there. So I know so many people are looking for practical things that they can do and act on that will certainly help them. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, sometimes it's a difficult question, Rob. I can totally understand that, because sometimes we act on intuition. There are times that you just feel happy and optimistic, and there are times that you just feel pessimistic and down. And it's probably because a lot of things good that happened on that particular day or week, or not so good things that happen. What I do usually at times when I find it difficult is to do a reflection. Just getting on your own and pick up a pen and a paper and do a calculation. Look at your day, look at your week, and see if there are reasons to be optimistic. And I can tell you that you do find reasons to be optimistic, Rob.
Yeah, that's so good. And because sometimes in order to look for the good to find it, we've got to have intentional time of getting alone. And I love what you're bringing out. It's reflection. We live in such a fast-paced world. It's go, 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 go. There's always more to do. There's always more people to lead and greater influence to have. But what I'm hearing you saying that is we need to learn the discipline of slowing down a little bit in order to speed up and work that much more effectively, to lead out of that place of slowness and slowing down. Because when we do that, and we can be reflective of the good that's happening in our lives, within our family, within our neighborhoods, within our leadership, within our sphere of influence, now some amazing things can come out of that place. Now, I've got to bring this up, RF, because you've spent a lot of time in government and outside of government within the area of peace. I like to call it peacemaking, right? And peace negotiations and peace process. You've written and you've helped negotiate some of the largest peace deals on the planet. So there's a lot from not only just being hopeful as it relates to a person and a leader, but also operating and functioning out of a place of peace. And as I alluded to earlier, if there's one thing we need right now in this world and in our own hearts, it's peace, isn't it? So tell me a little bit about that. For you, you've helped, write peace processes, and it's actually been in New York Times and other major news media outlets. So for you, where does peace come from? And we talked about having a higher perspective, being hopeful, but this area of peace, how do you operate and function out of a place of peace? Because that really is, I think it's wonderful that we just talked about hope and learning the discipline of slowing down and having times of reflection to find the good. Because what I find is things begin to slow down, we can operate more out of a place of peace and not get caught up in the go, 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 go mentality. So for you, what does peace mean, and how do you intentionally and consistently operate out of a place of peace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob, again, and we can talk hours about this. But let me tell you one thing. We hear a lot about the war in Afghanistan, and also that it's been going on for 40 years, and it's very difficult to believe that it will end. The number one thing is that I personally refuse to believe that it will not end. I think that that's a lie, that it will not end. I think it will end. The conflict will end, and we will see peace. And to do that, it's harder sometimes to mobilize a few people to come into this category and believe that we can actually make things happen. Sometimes it's easier to mobilize the masses, but it's more difficult to mobilize the few. But the few who are strategic, the few who can make things happen, and that's where we need to focus. I like this professor an author who writes about creating the conditions for building peace, John Paul Lederach. And he talks about the critical mass versus the critical yeast. That sometimes we go after a large group of people and trying to mobilize them so they come out and call for peace. And that's good, that's necessary, it has to be there. What's more important, or at least equally important, and that will influence change is finding the critical or the strategic yeast, the smaller group of people, the right mix of small group of people who can make things happen. That's very difficult, but we have to take that difficult task upon us and work for it. And peace, Rob, for different people means different things. It can be very broad and abstract. It could also be very concrete. For me personally, when I see a little child girl going to school and smiling with a backpack, is for me peace. If we can make that happen for every Afghan child, no matter where they live, that is peace for me.
Do you know what I enjoy about that is, you're highlighting two things, at least for me. I'm learning from you quite a bit, so thank you. One thing is, it's not as much about the masses. Oftentimes we think that we've had to have greater influence and greater movement and accomplish so much. We've got to have the crowds of people on our side. I'm hearing you say, no, that's not the case. Some of the greatest movement within Afghanistan, within the United States, and within this world happens with just a few people that you spend time with that capture a vision, an optimistic vision, a shared vision, if you will, about peace, about prosperity, about goodness and kindness coming upon the earth, unity in the midst of that. And when a few catch on fire with that, all of a sudden, people around them start catching on fire in such a good way. And so I love that you're highlighting that. In addition to that, what I'm gaining from you is that peace can just be about having a moment with someone. And when you're present with that school student, when you're present with that leader that you're sitting across the table from, when you're having a very meaningful conversation with your spouse, your business partner, with your neighbor, and it's as though everyone else on the planet begins to fade away, and it's just that one person and that conversation, and that's all that matters. That's peace, because you've learned to embrace that present moment. So thank you so much for that. Another area I've got to ask you about, Aref, and this is, again, thank you so much for just an honest conversation, because I find that leaders are very hungry. They're highly receptive to learn about these things and of the heart, of the mind. And so thank you for just your willingness. And I feel so honored you're willing to really have this deep conversation with me today. It's in the area of conflict. Conflict is something that in relationships with people around us, that there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of disagreement. And it can be so challenging, so difficult to get into agreement with even just one person, let alone a bunch of people around a common vision, around common bond. I know so many marriages in the United States of America, throughout the world, there's so much tension even in their own marriage and relationship, not to mention in a formal leadership role. So would you be able to share some wisdom, some insight as it relates to the work that you've done, where you've gone in and you've been a part of some of the most tension-filled conversations and dialogues on the earth, and you brought about and helped bring about unity in the midst of those tension-filled conversations? What could you say to leaders listening and watching right now that I want to operate not only out of hope and not only out of peace, but I want to learn how to have a really meaningful conversation when the person doesn't necessarily agree with me? We want to find that unity, a bond of unity. What have you learned in your experience professionally and personally that could really help people embrace conflict and not view conflict as a major problem, but view it as, in a sense, like a superpower of sorts? What would you say?
Yeah, it's very difficult, Rob. Again, these are very difficult questions that you are asking, particularly in the context of Afghanistan. I know that we need to, there is this concept of looking at conflict as an opportunity. But for people who are losing lives every day, it's very difficult to sell that argument, honestly. But then there are conflicts at different levels. And conflicts at their core are not bad. But when the expressions become violent, that's where we have our problems in Afghanistan. And it makes it very difficult to talk about this because we're talking about human lives and many of them, and for a long span of time that needs to end. And so it does become very difficult. I would say 3 or 4 things to that. Number one is our vision. We cannot lose sight of that. We have to end this bloodshed. Or if we're talking about smaller conflicts in whatever capacity they may be, we need to have that vision, that ability to see through the moment into the future, into what it can be that is not there right now. That's the number one thing. And then trying to establish that with whoever you are working with is very, very difficult. And so it requires a lot of patience. And we just cannot afford to grow tired of trying different methodologies, different strategies, and reflecting and thinking on how we can ultimately reach and accomplish our vision. The second thing to that is flexibility. Sometimes we just cannot plan everything ahead of time. And particularly in negotiations, particularly dealing with conflict and people who are actors who are totally different from you, actors who have different interests from you. And because of that, they have resorted to anything, including violence. It's very difficult to plan everything ahead of time and know exactly every move of your own or the other party. And so flexibility would be an important component of our walk here. And then the third thing, I like what William Ury, this is another author that I admire, he talks about going to the balcony. And when you feel like it's very heavy, when you feel like nothing is working, just take a break and reflect. Go to the balcony.
That's so good. Go to the balcony. I'm hearing you through everything we've discussed in this conversation. You know, that reflection just keeps coming back to me. There's so much intimacy and personal power as it relates to when we just take time for ourselves, and it really does speak to inside out leadership. And you are, RF, one of the greatest inside out leaders that I've ever met, that I've ever known. And if I could really wrap my arms around this entire conversation for me personally, and something that has really been highlighted, is you have such a vision, such an optimistic, peace-filled vision for the long haul, for the long run. You know, again, we live in a culture, in world culture, where people want things immediately. But you see a greater tomorrow in Afghanistan. You believe for a greater tomorrow in Afghanistan, in the United States, and throughout the world. And some of those things could take years to accomplish. Some of those things you may never actually be on this earth to see, but yet you believe it in your own heart and you believe it in your own mind. And for that, I say thank you. And I honor you for doing that. If there's one thing that leaders can grab a hold of today, it's just that. Take the necessary time to reflect and to broaden your vision, your optimistic vision for yourself and for those in your sphere of influence. Aref, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining me today. Before we leave this conversation, what's on the horizon for you? What's something that you're getting excited about in your leadership, in your relations with Afghans as well as Americans? What's something that you, just want to leave behind with us today in the midst of this conversation?
Thank you so much, Rob. I think that I'm really excited about this new role here in the United States. I worked for many years inside Afghanistan. This is the first time I'm assigned on a mission abroad, and I see that I'm learning a lot, connecting with a lot of Afghans from all kinds of walks of lives, and there's a lot of there's a lot I can learn from them and come alongside of them, and maybe together we will be able to accomplish a few things. I'm really excited about being here, working with the Afghan diaspora and working also with the American people. It's an honor to be here, Rob, and thank you so much for this great conversation. Great to speak with you. Great to see you after a long time.
Yeah. No, the pleasure's all mine. I've been overjoyed and so honored that you were able to join with me today. Very briefly, if people want to find out more about you, Aref, where can they go to find more about your work? And even if they have a question based on this interview, where they could turn to?
I am on LinkedIn. I use that frequently. Also on Twitter. They can look me up. It's easy to find it.
Great. Thank you again so much. I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you. And anything I can do to serve you and your sphere of influence, please let me know. And I want to not only thank Aref for the time that he spent with us today, but I also want to thank AutoConversion, our sponsor, because without AutoConversion, this certainly would not be possible. In addition to that, I want to thank all of our viewers today and everyone listening in, whether it's in the live show or the future podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy day with high demand in your schedule and so many people that want your attention. You've spent this half hour with us. So for that, I want to say thank you very much. If you want to find out more about me, feel free to go to robbholman.com. And on there, if you go to robbholman.com/checkup, you can take a free inside out leadership assessment that will assess various areas of your life and give you the results to find out, hey, what are you doing really good at in your inside out leadership journey, and what things do you need to improve on? So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And on behalf of Aref, my name's Robb Holman. Thank you for being with us on Inside Out Leadership. We'll see you later.